I trusted him with everything. My heart, my life, my world. 7 years together, and I thought we were unbreakable. But then I started noticing the little things. Silenced phones, long calls he wouldn't explain, a distance I couldn't ignore. At first I told myself it was stress, that I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And when I discovered the truth, I felt like my whole world shattered. The question is, how far would I go when betrayal pushes me to the edge? If someone had asked me in 2021 where I saw myself in 5 years, I would have answered with such certainty that it almost feels embarrassing now. I would have said something about building a family with Michael, about settling into a place we both loved, about being the kind of couple people admired at barbecues and Christmas parties. We'd been together since 2012, married in 2016, and for the most part, those years were good. No, better than good. We were solid, we laughed easily, we shared inside jokes, and even though we had our disagreements, I always felt we were on the same team. Then in late 2021, Michael's company offered him a long-term project in Houston. We were living in Austin at the time, in a modest 2-bedroom home with a little fenced yard and a kitchen we had renovated ourselves. He was excited and I tried to be excited for him, even though my stomach knotted at the thought of being apart. The plan was simple enough. He'd work there during the week, come home on weekends, and we'd make it work. After all, plenty of couples did long distance in much worse circumstances. At first it wasn't terrible. Fridays became little celebrations when he returned home, and Sundays were bittersweet, but I managed. I threw myself into my job at the local library, spent more time with my mom, and told myself this was just temporary. But by mid-2022 the weekends began to feel thinner. He was tired, distracted, always on his phone. I brushed it off as stress. He was working long hours after all, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet unease started whispering. By September 2022 I realized I couldn't do it anymore. The house felt too empty, and I hated the constant countdown, until Sunday night. I told Michael I wanted to move to Houston permanently. He seemed genuinely happy, relieved even. We made plans, though the universe seemed to conspire against me. That winter, a storm knocked down part of our fence. Then in November, a sudden plumbing disaster. By January I was still in Austin patching one problem after another, while he lived his separate life during the week. I told myself that once I got there, everything would be fine. I believed it like a mantra, whispering it every time doubt crawled into my chest. When I finally moved in March of 2023, I thought I was saving us. I didn't know then that I was walking into a storm that had already broken. The first hints were small, little things you could almost ignore if you wanted to. Michael was quieter. He would come home from work, barely mumble hello, shower immediately, and then disappear to the gym for almost 2 hours. By the time he got back, it was dinner. Then, I told myself he was adjusting to me being around again. I even convinced myself it was normal for couples to drift a little after years together. But in January, before my move, I'd noticed something gnawing at me. He'd started silencing his phone at night, even slipping it under his pillow. I'd never known him to be so protective of it. The old me, the trusting me, would have let it go, but this version of me, worn down by distance and loneliness, couldn't. I started checking our phone bill online. That's when I saw it. Hours of calls every single day to one number I didn't recognize. At first I thought it had to be a friend, maybe a new colleague, but the times gnawed at me. Calls at 5 a.m. during his commute, calls during his lunch break, calls again on his way home, 3 hours a day. 4 months of this pattern. The math was undeniable. I remember sitting on the couch in April, the bill in my hands, my heart thundering in my ears. I felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. When I finally confronted him, he looked me in the eye and lied. He said it was his best friend, but I already knew his friend's number by heart, and this wasn't it. When I called him out, his face changed. He admitted it was a woman from work, a coworker. He swore they just talked, that he was depressed and didn't want to burden me, that she was his support system. The words felt rehearsed, too polished, but I wanted so badly to believe him. I clung to his explanation like a lifeline, even though my gut screamed that I was holding on to smoke. The weeks after that conversation felt like walking through fog. I told myself I'd forgiven him, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything. I kept discovering more. Her posts about him, how she wrote about marrying him, starting a family, even sexual things. And he didn't shut it down. He liked them, encouraged her in small but undeniable ways. Every time I pictured him in his car laughing with her while I sat alone at home fixing fences and unclogging pipes, something inside me cried. He claimed nothing physical happened, but the intimacy of those hours on the phone burned me more than any affair could. I started doubting myself. Was I boring? Had I not given him enough love? Was I blind to his unhappiness? He told me he thought I didn't love him, that he was depressed, even suicidal, and that she saved him. How do you argue with that? How do you defend yourself against someone saying they needed another woman to survive? The resentment grew like mold. He started treating me better than ever, showering me with attention, but instead of feeling loved, I felt insulted. Why now? Why after everything? Why did it take betrayal for him to notice me again? I withdrew from friends. I stopped answering texts from my mom because I couldn't explain the chaos in my chest. At work I smiled and shelved books, but at night I sat awake staring at the ceiling, imagining them together. My marriage wasn't just cracked, it was a house with a hollow foundation, and I was terrified the whole thing would collapse. By the summer of 2023, I realized I couldn't keep living in that fog. I started therapy. At first I cried through every session, stumbling over my words, but slowly I began piecing myself back together. My therapist told me something that stuck. Betrayal has a way of making you doubt your own worth, but his choices weren't a reflection of me, they were a reflection of him. That didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a thread of clarity to hold on to. I started journaling again. I went on long walks by Buffalo Bayou, letting the humid Houston air sting my lungs. I thought about leaving him almost every day. Some days I imagined packing a bag and driving back to Austin. Other days I thought maybe staying would mean we could rebuild something new. I also confronted him again, not in anger, but with calm determination. I told him I knew there was more to the story than he'd admit. He swore there wasn't. Maybe he believed his own lie by then, but I no longer hung on every word. His story wasn't the only one that mattered anymore. Mine did too. For the first time in years, I started making decisions without him at the center. I enrolled in an online course in archival studies, something I'd dreamed of for years. I joined a book club. I began rediscovering pieces of myself that had been buried under the weight of our marriage. Now, it's August 2025, 2 years since I first noticed the silence in his eye. A year and a half since I moved to Houston thinking I could save us. Some days I look at Michael across the dinner table and feel nothing but anger. Other days I see the man I fell in love with, trying in his flawed, desperate way to make amends. We're still together, but our marriage is not the same. Maybe it never will be. I don't fully trust him, and I'm not sure I ever will, but I'm stronger now than I was before. I've learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself to keep someone else afloat. People ask if it gets better. I don't know if it ever truly does. The betrayal doesn't disappear, it just becomes a scar you learn to live with. Some mornings I wake up and the resentment feels unbearable. Other mornings I breathe easier, like I'm finally stepping into my own skin. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll leave him. Maybe one day I'll forgive him completely. But right now I'm focusing on me. For the first time in years, that feels like enough. And maybe that's the real resolution, not fixing the marriage, not pretending the betrayal never happened, but learning to survive the wreckage and walk forward, even if the path is still uncertain.